Hello, friends, and welcome back to Indie Book Talk. Today we have Amit Verma, who is the author of The Quiver in the Purlieu, which I had to look up because I didn't know what that word meant until I saw it on his book cover, but it does in fact mean an area near or surrounding a place.
Oh,
So be intrigued. Uh, Amit, thank you for coming. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Emma, and thank you, Shelley. I
so
really appreciate it. Yeah.
what is this book about? Is it nonfiction, fiction? Tell us a little bit of the book itself first.
So the book is fiction, and that's what I dabble with. I don't like reality, for that matter. But no, but that's besides the point. Of every fiction is a reflection of reality, and every nonfiction is a reflection of reality too. So the book specifically. So for the book, I need to go back to about 10 or 15 years ago, and which is when I started writing. And my first book came out about 10 years ago, The Lives and the Times, and the second one, The Lives and the Times too, and the third one, A Quiver in the Purlieu. They all essentially treat with a grand theme, which is exploration of the mindset of the middle class, of an emerging middle class, and how an individual understands it, perceives it, and influences it. So that's the grand theme. Now, for the first two books, it was based on a very specific platform. But in the third book, The Quiver and the Purlieu, I took the platform away. I took away national and cultural boundaries. I started exploring a person who is comfortable in many different places. In Canada, in India, in New Zealand, in the United States, traveling around Africa, and things like that. So how does that person view the world as it is, and how does that person influence the world as it is? So that's the grand theme that I've been interested in, and that's what the book is about.
But it is fiction.
It is fiction, and yes, that is true.
Because that felt very philosophical, which I'm all
Yes.
for in fiction.
Well, you can never you can never take the author away from any work. You cannot take the artist away from a painting. You cannot take the actor away from a movie. I mean, everything is a reflection of the self in one sense or the other. So yes, but it is fiction. I wouldn't want to be caught any other way.
Would
so
you
go ahead.
would you class this as fantasy, realistic fiction? Where does it fall in the fiction spectrum?
Well, I would say it is more of a literary fiction, and I would say, if you have been a fan of Murakami,
Mm-hmm.
Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Salman Rushdie. So there's a bit of a magical realism about that work, and so that's what I'm interested in. So that magical realism part. I mean, there's the real world, and then there's the magic part, and they all come together because it gives me more degrees of freedom. It gives the writers who indulge in it more degrees of freedom to express what they want to do. It is of course more challenging. It tests your creativity. It gives you a headache sometimes when you're writing and then trying to imagine worlds where things are happening. um, but it is at the same time a lot more exciting. Gives you, as I said, gives you a lot more freedom to express your ideas and your opinions and explore things that you would not normally be able to do if you treated reality as reality. Yeah.
So I understand that you are donating profits from this towards cheetah conservation.
Well, I'm donating my earnings,
Okay.
not the profits. So yes, so that's interesting. So because I have been a long time supporter of animal rights in general, right? I mean, in fact, one of my petition on change.org has on treating farm animals right has garnered, I think, more than 2,500 signatures so far already. With Cheetah Conservation Fund, I have been a supporter of that organization for, I think, about 10 years now, more than 10
Mm.
years. And so about a few months ago, they were trying to raise funds for the local Texas chapter, and I said, you know what? Let me do my part. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to donate all my earnings for the next few weeks to a couple of months. I think end of July or something. Um, uh, all my royalties that I receive from the sales of the book, I will donate it to them for to help their mission.
And this is the Texas chapter, or is it
That's
the
the
overarching chapter?
well the overarching chapter, but the Texas chapter was the one that was raising funds. So, but
Okay.
I said, you know what, I'll do that for the entire Cheetah Conservation Fund. It's a wonderful organization. Um, and it has been doing great work, and many people might be aware of Laurie Marker, the founder of Cheetah Conservation Fund, and just a force of nature in her own rights. And she's been part of that entire cheetah universe for the last 30 years, if I'm not mistaken, and maybe more.
Okay, I have a noob
Mhm.
question to ask. Uh, you're talking about cheetah conservation and the Texas chapter. Are there cheetahs in Texas? Like, where? I don't understand.
No, there are no cheetahs in Texas, and I wish there were, right? I wish there were. Um, uh, and you know what? That also brings me to a sad part about the cheetahs, and that is um, I don't know if you remember a few months ago there was this tiger in Houston roaming around. It was in the news, right? And for some reason, people love to have these exotic animals as pets. And one of the greatest threats that cheetahs face in Africa is the illegal pet trade, and those are captured and sent over to many countries across the world, but primarily in the Middle East, to be kept as pets. And most of them end up dying within a few months to a couple of years because people just don't know how to take care of them. But coming back to your question, no. So the Cheetah Conservation Fund is a global organization, right? Which has its activities in the United States, in Canada, across many countries in Europe, in Australia, and Africa, of course. And so each place has its own chapter. So there's a Texas chapter for the Cheetah Conservation Fund, which involves the local population here and tries to, do work, get people in Texas involved. So just so to speak.
Yeah,
Got it.
Texas
Okay.
is one of the places in the U.S. where you can own pretty much most of the exotic animals.
I think so too, and
Really?
that's yes, and that's true.
Yeah, many states don't allow it, but Texas is one of the ones that has a pretty open policy on everything. That you don't have to be a zoo or a preservation place. You can just, I could walk out and be like, yes, I would like one of these today.
That that is true. That is true. And there are many. So many of the ranches here have been converted over the years into a kind of a tourist place, touristy, right? And safaris and all those things, so you can drive around, look at some of the wild animals, moving around, emus and ostriches and giraffes and all those things. So um it has its downsides, but it also has its plus sides. And and the plus side here is this: you cannot help something if you don't know it exists, right? So, and that's why I'm also a big supporter of zoos, in spite of the fact that they sometimes mistreat animals, which they shouldn't. We now know a lot more about zoos than we did 50 years ago. But if you don't know about those animals and the fact that they exist, if you don't know about cheetahs and the fact that the cheetahs exist, you wouldn't
And not
you,
living in Texas.
and not living in Texas. That's true. So you wouldn't, yes, yes. So you
Yeah.
wouldn't be concerned about conserving them and preserving them, right? And so that's really important.
So do you're using this book as an opportunity to raise money to give to this charity. Does the book itself tackle any of these issues? Or is it just an idea that you feel strongly about so you wanted to give as the author?
Um, that's a good question. So this book, the third book, a Quiver in the Purlieu, itself doesn't directly deal with those issues. My previous books did. Um,
Okay.
they did. And they did that within the context of India, where I was born, and I spent about 20 years of my life there. So yes, the first two books did. The third book did not, because it's about a person moving across the globe, and there are multiple other things happening. So I left that part out. Yes, I did leave that part out.
But I imagine it still influences your writing overall in little ways, probably throughout what the characters are doing that you may not realize.
That's true. I mean, that's never. And as I said in the beginning, I mean, fiction is never too far away from facts, and sometimes facts are never too far away from fiction. So, we they are all interconnected. So, if I'm putting down something in writing, it could be construed as fiction, but it's also it's a product of my own thinking, or the thinking of any artist or any writer. So I mean, there is a physical basis to all that. So it's not in vacuum, right? These things don't happen in vacuum.
Right.
Yeah.
Earlier, kind of right near the beginning of the interview, when we said, "Oh, you're giving your profits," and you corrected us for the correct term. When you talk about how you're giving money, I think this is a really important thing for authors to know. How do you phrase it to make sure that people understand what money is going where?
That's a good question. So what I'm giving away are royalties. So every author, um, well, the publisher is the one that sells the book and gets the money, and part of the money goes um, to the author, and that's the author's earning, and they're called royalties. It's not any different than, for example, the music industry, right? I mean, every time a song is played, a small amount goes to the artist, right? So
Right.
that's what I am donating. um that's so it's called royalty, and that's what I'm donating.
So the distinction here is the publisher is not making this contribution. You personally, as the author, have chosen to take your share of the money and to
That
give it
is
to this
that
organization.
is true. I choose to remain a poor author, and I will make sure that Cheetah survives.
Well, I'm
So,
sure the
It's a
cheetahs
choice.
appreciate that.
are they
They'll
are
still
they
eat
close
me.
to?
I don't think they'll
Uh,
appreciate it. They'll still eat me if I meet them. They wouldn't care how much money I donated, but that's fine.
you never know. They don't like being alone at night. They might snuggle.
Yeah.
That's terrifying.
So, are cheetahs endangered? Um,
Cheetahs
are
are
they?
severely endangered. Severely endangered. And you know what? Cheetahs are, in fact, I would say, a barometer of whatever is going on. So if the cheetahs survive, we will survive. So over the last so the cheetahs, at the turn of the 20th century, I think there were something like 100,000 cheetahs roaming around Africa and parts of Asia, right?
Mhm.
Um, and the, that range has been reduced to something like 10%. Um, and in places like, for example, India, the cheetahs are extinct. I mean, the last cheetah was probably hunted in 1952 or 53. Um, so we don't have too many cheetahs. I mean, 2,500 cheetahs in the world, probably in the wild, um, and in a very limited space. So the Cheetah Conservation Fund, and this is what I like about them. I mean, they're taking this holistic approach about towards conservation, which I think is a model for every conservation effort. So you cannot view conservation um, in isolation. There are people. There's human wilderness interaction
Mhm.
that has to be accounted for too. And there are lots of people who really depend on the forest or on their livestock. I mean, take away one goat or one cattle, and one farmer would be pushed into poverty, right? And that's the environment that Cheetah Conservation Fund, for example, and many other organizations work in. So you have to take everything into account. You have to look at the interaction, you have to look at the environment, you have to look at how to help the farmers, how to look at the ranchers, and how to at the same time save the cheetahs
Mhm.
without hurting anybody in the process. And at the same time, they're also working in places like Uzbekistan and India and other places, I think, to reintroduce wild cheetahs. So keeping our fingers crossed on that. So let's see. As I said, if cheetahs are really the barometer of where we will be in the next couple of decades or so. If they survive, we'll survive. Absolutely.
So do you think your next book might be based on that type of scenario, or do you know a next book yet?
That's a good question because writing is so tough. It is not
Now
the
it's
most.
easy.
It is not the most pleasant exercise. I mean, so the only reason why anybody would write would be because either they're crazy or they get this compulsion to write. And I wrote my first book, and then I thought that compulsion to write would die down. It never did. So I ended up writing the second one, and then I said that would be probably the end of it. And no, and a couple of years later, I just felt this urge to torture myself again. So
You
I wrote
just
the
keep
third book.
lying to yourself.
Maybe I do.
Welcome
So
to the dark
yes,
side.
yeah, that is true. But yes, there would be a fourth book too, and that would be the end, right? I'm
Nope,
going to say that, right?
no one
And
believes you.
I hope I'm right this time. The fourth time would be the charm.
I hate to break it to you, but if you write more than one book,
Yeah,
you're
you're a
stuck with
goner.
this for life.
That is true. That's what somebody very very ominously once told me. If you write the first book, you are a writer. If you write the
Yep.
second book, you are an author, and it's all downhill from there. So
Just give in now. Just
it's not going to happen, unfortunately.
So let me reel us back here for a
Yeah.
second.
Uh-huh.
Um, a couple of times you've mentioned your publisher, and we
Uh-huh.
are an indie book cast, so we want to make it clear who is your publisher.
My publisher is is a fabulous publisher based out of Dallas called Madville Publishing, Madville, and a shout out to Kim Davis and her fabulous team. Um, um, they really put in the effort in producing a really great book, and they had the patience to work with me. Um, they never got upset at me, at least not on my face, at least not that I'm aware of. Um, so that's I like that. And they had the patience. I mean, I would give it to them, and they really focused on quality. There are many publishers who would not focus on quality, who would focus on getting a manuscript, doing the bare minimum and getting it out ASAP and trying to make as much money as you can. Uh, Madville Publishing, I can tell you, is not like that. They really try to build a relationship. They really try to put the best quality out there that they can. It's a tough market, and they are doing an awesome work there.
And I seem to remember that we had another author recently from Madville, and maybe that's how you found us.
That is true.
Uh,
Mike Hilbig.
yes.
ah,
Yes,
okay.
yes, yes, yes.
Ah, it all comes together now.
That
We're
is
part
true.
of the
And
family now.
Yeah.
you are, whether you like it or not.
Oh no, we're being sucked in too,
That is
Shelley.
true. Well, welcome to the dark side now. Now from me to you, right?
I see what happened here. We're all in Madville. We're
That is
all
true.
mad here.
That is
Hmm.
true.
Okay.
That is true. But Mike is a great writer, and a great friend. So he has a great book out there. So if anybody is looking for a book and they're done reading my book, I would recommend the next book that I would recommend would be theirs. The advantage of reading my book is, of course, that you're not only helping yourself read a great book, but you're also helping save the cheetahs and, of course,
Right.
save independent book publishers. from
So
the
next time
onslaught
your
of cheetahs.
partner is like, "Do you really need another book?" Your answer is, "I need to save the cheetahs."
Right. This is
Absolutely,
important.
that is true. That is true. Absolutely.
Just show them a picture of a cheetah on the phone. This is why I need to buy a book.
Look at the baby cheetahs. Look at them.
Oh, baby cheetahs are the scary ones. The
Oh,
elders
I
are
know,
at
they're
least
so cute.
they are.
so okay, before we devolve into just
Mhm.
looking at cheetah pictures,
Darn it.
which has been Shelley's plan all along, I know. Can you tell us where people can find you on the internet?
Sure. They can find me on um, uh, well, of course, my website. I'm just thinking, am I that famous on the
He's
internet?
lost.
Maybe I am. Maybe that's pretty much what that's pretty much what the 21st century is about, right? Becoming famous on the internet, right? Um,
Yeah.
and but I'm yet to be there, fortunately and thankfully.